Good afternoon, science ethics class. I'm first class Eric Green.
First class Lauren Hatfield.
And today we're talking about, does commercial fishing have a future? We are the pro stance in this issue. So first off, we want to talk about what is the issue and what are the elements that are most impactful on commercial fishing. So obviously talking about the future of commercial fisheries, we have to talk about the environmental future. So the environmental future is capable and regulated to sustain ongoing commercial fishing. We also need to have a sustainable future. So we have plans, regulations, and enforcements that are present today and allow for a sustainable future going forward. That way our actions now will promote long-term sustainability. And speaking of sustainability, we also need commercial ability in the future. So we'll need to have resources, personnel, and economics, which will support commercial fisheries moving forward.
First, we need to talk about the competing demands that have led to this environmental issue, which also includes the environmental health. And what we're going to talk about in that light is pollution, climate change, and habitat, which affects the sustainability of all fish abundance. First, tackling pollution, we're going to talk about air, waste, and water. It is a well-known conception that pollution is a huge factor as far as fishing and fish availability and fish sustainability go. So to tackle some of those issues and break some conceptions, we are going to talk about first air. You can see a graph here in the red, blue, and purple that address emissions, and the key takeaway that we want to focus on here is that emission trends have substantially decreased since 1980, as well as fuel combustion emissions, and a total of U.S. emissions have increased by only 11% since 1980, which really isn't that large of a percentage. Second, as waste, if you go to the bottom box, landfilling of waste has decreased from 94% of the amount generated in 1960 to 50% of the amount generated in 2018, which is a huge decreasing trend, which we want to see moving forward. It gives us hope that our waste and pollution is going in the right direction as we try to conserve and sustainably take care of what we have on land in order to take care of what we have in the water. And that leads into water. And the 1972 Clean Water Act has driven significant improvements in the U.S. water quality, according to the first comprehensive study of water pollution over the past several decades by researchers at the University of California, Berkeley.
Also, moving forward, looking at climate change, we wanted to address some of the benefits that are typically not seen and don't get as much attention as they normally would. So one of the first ones that we're going to talk about is the science. And people think of climate change right off the bat as being a bad thing. And while we're not advocating for climate change, one of the important things that should be noted is climate change has spurred scientific advances to produce energy efficient methods and Earth surveying. And with that going forward, we can be a lot more economically sound. And with benefits of warming and climate change with job creation, we'll have longer heat waves for agricultural production and earlier transit of northern shipping lanes. And again, moving forward, again, with benefits typically unseen, international competing demands are also typically unseen with climate change. And the intervention against climate change has increased international corporations, cooperation and awareness, as well as networking. So we wanted to also look at the habitat suitability and preservation. So one of the major things that allows this to be sustainable progress and have a future in commercial fishing is farming and aquaculture. Specifically, salmon and shrimp have been shown to grow considerably in the past 2 decades, and aquaculture is also beginning to farm a lot more marine species. So starting from the ground up and using those very high producing species, we've been able to fine tune the aquaculture and actually build it up to be a lot more competitive of a commercial fishing business. And then also on the same line of modernization, we've been able to make massive increases in fishing gear. So federal U.S. action is constantly in the works to improve, modify, and design wildlife and ecosystem-friendly fishing gear. For example, action towards lineless fishing gear, which we'll talk about later in a future slide.
And continuing this idea of habitat suitability and preservation, we have more innovation as far as migrations go. It is also well known that human development is impacting fish migrations. And one thing that we noticed from NOAA Fisheries is that the U.S. is actually working to maintain these natural migrations with the impacts of human development. For example, large dams that are used to create power, this power that we talked about in the previous slide as far as science goes, are required by law to consult with NOAA Fisheries in order to allow for these native migrating fish to move upstream and over the dam in an effective manner. And then lastly, for habitat suitability and preservation, we have an increase in law enforcement. The Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act is the primary law that governs marine fisheries management in the U.S. federal waters, which we will get into later with the Coast Guard interaction.
Also, the future of commercial fishing is safeguarded by high standards. An example of these high standards that allow the worldwide fishing and commercialization of fishing to continue is the UN World Bank, for example, in 2016 was remarked by international review to have responsibly generated 148 million tons of seafood that was able to aid those experiencing food shortages all over the world. And these contributions have also been shown to increase each year since. Another example of high standards, which we touched on earlier, was new practices in the fishing gear. An example comes in ropeless fishing. So as you can see in the picture, one of the things that we're trying to work with in the industry is changing the traditional setup to be a lot more economically aware of all of the other species that are coexisting in the prime habitat of the commercial fishery. And then also moving forward with the safety of life at sea, the high standards that go with commercial fishing has also pushed a lot more safety and situational awareness with global weather patterns changing, which has been a massive increase in commercial fishing safety.
Next, we're going to get into the fishing economics. It's no secret that the commercial fishing industry is a huge industry. It brings in a lot of money. So first, looking at the U.S. industry alone, the commercial fishing and seafood industry, which includes harvesters, processors, dealers, wholesalers, and retailers, supported 1.2 million jobs in 2016. It has only grown since, and generated 144 billion in sales impacts and adding 61 billion to the GDP again in 2016. Looking at the global industry, we all share the oceans. This statistic shows the seafood market value worldwide in 2020, as well as forecasted figures in 2021 to 2025. The global seafood market reached a value of 253 billion US dollars in 2021, is projected to reach to about $336 billion in 2025. And lastly, in part C, the commercial gain. This is just a visual to show that the commercial versus the recreational gains that we get from fishing is that overall commercial fisheries have a huge impact and bring in a lot more than recreational fishing.
Aiding and aggravating in the industry, some personal actions that are being taken with the future life of commercial fishing. Consumers need to ensure that they're only buying sustainable harvest fish stocks. So one of the other ways to ensure that commercial fishing has a future is to raise awareness in the consumer, and no action is too small to not have an impact. An example of this is the dolphin safe and tuna safe fishing. So these are external processes of fishing commercially that ensure the safety of other species. And another one is social actions. Education is never hurtful. And ensuring that everyone understands the sustainable fishing practices that are out there will massively increase the future preservation of commercial fishing.
Bringing it home with resolution and relevancy, first we want to touch that all of these ideas do not compete with each other. It is one common goal. As individuals, the fishing industry impacts the food that we eat, the oceanic environments we interact with, and the economic benefits that it reaps. For us specifically, as we're about to become Coast Guard officers, it is soon expected that we will be the subject matter experts on the regulations and expectations enabling these commercial fishery success. So all of these regulations that we touched on previously and the ideas we have moving forward In the Coast Guard, we will be at the forefront of holding the industry accountable to ensure a successful future in commercial fisheries success. Thank you very much. Here are our references, followed by our peer-reviewed references.
Thank you.